On this episode of Travels with Bill, we're actually watching a house fire. We're here to learn some interesting things. This is really early on in the fire, by the way. We've only got a few seconds of this. We're going to cut in a moment to a little later on. So we're going to talk about what's going on here and why it feels like it's forever before a fire truck shows up. Now, the particular day of this fire, I was only a couple blocks away, and I saw the very first bit of black smoke come up as the fire broke out in the house. I don't know exactly what was going on in the house, but clearly the fire got out at some point. Probably a window broke, and then poof, off went the black smoke. That's when the neighbors started noticing it too. So that very first shot we saw was less than a minute after the fire became visible. That's part of why you're saying, well, how come there's no fire trucks yet? Well, they've been called, but we're still waiting. It's not a bad thing that we're still waiting. It just feels like forever. The panic that goes through you when you're at a house fire, especially the first time you've ever seen one, is why aren't they here yet? Fire department response times are actually pretty good. This particular department's usually there in 4 or 5 minutes from the time they're leaving the hall and then just travel time to the scene. They're paid on call, so they have to come from wherever they are, get to the fire trucks, get in, and drive over here. They are coming. In fact, in a distance you can hear them already, but it's going to take them a couple more minutes to actually get to the scene of the fire. So let's talk about that. When you're in a situation like this, you'll be thinking they should be here already. There's some things you could do in the meantime, and that's part of why we cut away from the first video. When I first got there, it became very apparent nobody had checked if anyone was home yet, and in fact they were having trouble giving directions to the 911 operator because even though it was a neighbor calling, they couldn't remember what street they lived on because they were panicking so much. Once we got that sorted out, that's when I started filming again, and we were just kind of watching. You can see a guy there in the yellow. He's a fire guy from a different department, but he was checking as well, trying to make sure that there's nobody inside. By the way, there was nobody inside. The family wasn't home. That's why nobody called the fire department sooner when they first smelled smoke in the house, because they weren't there to know their house was on fire. See the guy on the roof on the building next door? Now, that wasn't the safest thing to do. I get why he was doing it though. If he sprayed water on his roof, that was going to stop it from catching fire. Hear the sirens in the distance? They're definitely getting closer already. Close enough we can hear them above the music. He's spraying water there to keep his roof from catching fire. His fence is already burning, but he doesn't want the fire spreading to his house. That's called an exposure. That's where there's something exposed to the flames that could catch fire too, and you could have 2 house fires instead of just 1. Well, the fire trucks are almost here. Felt like forever, right? It's less than 3 minutes of video so far. It's just the time goes so slowly when you're watching something burn and needing help from someone else to put it out. Now, the next part of this video, we're going to talk about something that's actually quite disturbing. You're thinking of death. No, it's not that. It's about what municipalities are responsible to do to make sure things like this don't get any worse. Now, clearly that house has a lot of issues. You can see a lot of fire showing already. It would be hard to save the house at this point, but you still could. The firefighters are arriving. A minute or two from now, they have their hoses there and they could be spraying water on it. But you're going to see that doesn't happen, at least not the way you think it should. And we're going to talk about why on this particular day, and this particular fire, well, it wasn't the firefighters' fault, but someone let them down. First, let's talk about water systems. We're in a town, not a city here. So while they do have water, they have hydrants. They also have a water station, a water pumping station that needs to supply all of that. In a big city, you'd have a lot of very big pumps, but in smaller towns, you have what would be called distribution pumps. Those particular pumps can supply maybe a 2 or 3 inch, possibly up to a 4-inch pipe of water and pressurize the town. Normally a town doesn't use a lot of water, but when there's a fire, you have a secondary pumping system for that. They would call it a fire pump or an auxiliary pump. It's usually driven by maybe diesel, it could be propane. Quite often in smaller communities, those are the emergency pumps that double when the power's out. Now, larger communities would have generators and they just have bigger pumps, but in smaller places, you do actually get actual engines that run the pumps. And those pumps can do a lot more water than the normal pressurizing distribution pumps do. So what would happen when you connect to a fire hydrant and open it is the system would sense the water pressure go down, those emergency pumps would automatically start and run, and you would have as much water as you need coming out of the reservoir through the pipes to your fire truck. So what happens if those pumps aren't working? Well, that's what's happening today. That auxiliary pump is broken. There isn't an ability for these firefighters to hook up to hydrants and suck as much water as they need. That's why you're going to see them being extremely cautious with the water they have. Even though we're in the middle of a town with fire hydrants, they're going to be hauling water in here on tanker trucks to fill the fire trucks because they can't hook up to as many hydrants as they should. And the ones they can hook up to, they can't take as much water as they want to. So certainly they're working on the fire now, but this is going to go on a while. I actually held this video for years. This was filmed in 2017, and it was so heartbreaking to see them not have enough water. You see, they're already spraying some, but they're only using one line on it. I figured people would be pretty upset when they saw this, and rightly so. You see, it wasn't that the fire pump broke this morning when we were filming. It actually broke months before this fire, and nobody saw it as important to fix. That's the moral here. If you have a municipality, you're responsible for making sure your fire department can do its job, making sure they have the best things they can have to fight with fires as quickly as possible. It was completely unacceptable that somebody left a fire pump broken for more than a couple days. And to be clear, it happens. Fire pumps do break. In fact, at our water plant, we had one break, and we fixed it 3 days later because we certainly weren't going to leave it like that. In the meantime, while we knew it was broken, we had some protocols in place for what would we do if a fire broke out. We would make sure that we did everything we could to get the maximum amount of water there anyway. This particular day, the plan was to have tanker trucks bring it in 3,000 gallons at a time. A house fire like this can go through a lot of water. You could use 20, 30, 40, 50,000 gallons without really trying to make sure you had everything soaked down. So when you're bringing it 3,000 gallons at a time, well, bad things happen. Trucks can't get it there quick enough. Now, in fact, we've lost houses before. We've had houses that are not on the hydrant system, and we've had the water out there, almost had the fire out, just about finished it off to save the home, and then ran out of water and ended up losing a house. It's extremely disheartening when you see that happening inside a community where really there's hydrants right beside this house. There's always some armchair quarterbacking going on the internet. One fire video I posted had 20,000 comments, most of them saying the firefighters weren't doing their job properly, even though they weren't there fighting the fire that particular day. So let's talk what the three in front are doing. They're about to make entry into the house. They're going to go in there and they're going to make sure there's nobody in the house. They are spraying some water in the back. You'll see occasionally a little bit of water there, but you can see by the amount of smoke and flames that they're keeping safe with their water and making sure they don't use too much, because the guys that are going inside, they need enough water to be able to safely get back out of the house, especially if they find somebody in there, to get them out too. Admittedly, it's been burning so long at this point. If somebody was in there, I don't know, they'd be in a lot of trouble. You see them breaking down the door now. They had to go get an axe and bring it over. They get the door open and they go on inside. If they had the amount of water they should have, they'd be doing other things here. They'd obviously be putting more water on this, but they'd probably be looking at some water curtains for those exposures to make sure that they don't get anything spreading to another house. You can see the White House on the right-hand side. It's pretty close, and if that fire gets over there, it's going to be an issue for it too. But with a shortage of water, well, unfortunately, you watch it burn. So back to that municipal thing. I know a lot of times firefighters come to a council meeting and they say, gee, we need this. And the council says, well, I just don't know if we have the money. It's so important that you try and find it, because you don't want to be the person explaining why this happened. There were a lot of questions after this happened of how that pump could be broken for months, and why it was nobody had fixed it, and why it wasn't a priority. And it did get fixed, but it shouldn't have taken this happening for people to realize how much of a priority it was. Certainly when the next municipal election came along, was it thought of? I bet it was, when people said we want politicians that are going to keep our community safe. I don't want to end the video just showing a bunch of smoke and flames, because it does actually get better. We're going to cut ahead a big piece into the video to where they had some water and they could actually start fighting that roof fire. So see how much more the roof is burned already? I know, it got pretty bad, didn't it? Firefighters do amazing jobs. These folks all have full-time jobs, so they've all left that to come here and save somebody else's house and do everything they can to make it better. They train week after week, year after year for this too, to make sure they know how to do it, and do it quickly, and more importantly, do it safely. And that's why I finally posted the video. I thought I'd show you how bad it could get when you don't do what you should be doing to support the firefighters. Here comes that water. They're going to start spraying some on the roof now. If you take anything from this, take that the firefighters are doing their very best they could do here, and what they needed was politicians to do a better job of having everything ready for them. So hey, next time your fire department's fundraising for some new equipment, help out. Buy those raffle tickets, make a donation, talk to your mayor, talk to your councillors, make sure the fire department's well funded, because you want everything to be working when they get to a fire scene. Can you imagine how disappointed they are to sit there without enough water to fight a fire? Exactly. Anyway, that does it for this episode of Travels with Bill. We'll be traveling around a bunch of other places, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. We do have a couple other fire videos, but lots of trains and lots of neat places you can go visiting in Western Canada. That's it for now from outside a house fire that's finally getting put out. We'll see you on the next episode.